Without further ado, I will quickly get started. We are recording this session mostly for the purposes of documentation to be able to share it with other members who can't make it right now. To save bandwidth, please turn off your camera unless you're speaking. Most of us are comfortable in speaking in Hindi or English, so please choose a language that you're comfortable with. And through the chat, through the conversation, please feel free to use the chat window liberally, and we'll be able to look at it and call you in or respond to that over chat. Great. As most of you know, we've been a community of practice that has been in process and has been ongoing since May 2020, since very much the early days of the pandemic, and the intention was to create this to foster exchange and collaboration. The roles of this have been changing as the pandemic has been evolving, and particularly, as you know, in the past month and a half, we have really actively been trying to understand the overall efforts around understanding vaccine hesitancy and vaccine acceptance, and this is another effort towards that. We're about 60 members, 200 members over Slack, and we've now finished nearly more than a year now. We sent out feedback forms to everyone on email and Slack. Thank you for the 20 of you who did fill them. Ayushi is just going to drop a link to the feedback form again. Please feel free to use that and share with us your thoughts. It'll take not more than 10 minutes, and the responses we've got so far convey to us quite clearly that there is a keen interest to continue the community of practice. So we are trying to understand what is the shape and form it takes in the coming months, and we'll be in touch with you for that. Coffee Hour Sessions has been one of the more popular sort of formats of engagement across the board, and it looks like this will be something that we want to keep continuing. They were scheduled as conversations that are informal between community members to share not just their research findings and methods, but also really discuss with each other how they want to go ahead, which is why we've been setting these up. The intention for today's session is to talk about contextualizing and measuring COVID-19 vaccine hesitancy, particularly because there are several groups that have been looking at understanding it better. Maybe at the outset, what we'll do is just quickly set some context for you to give you a sense of what studies we have so far, and then we'll invite IDFC Institute to kindly share some of their work and share with us their learnings. Yeah, before I present the summary of vaccine hesitancy studies, which wouldn't take more than a few minutes, maybe if I could call upon Dr. Priya Nanda from the Gates Foundation to share with us a little bit more on why we feel like there's a need to harmonize and think about measuring hesitancy. Over to Priya.
Yeah, hi, Rohan. Thanks a lot. Actually, as with the first set of COVID research, which happened on mobile, I think vaccine hesitancy has also been this kind of very overwhelming effort where all of a sudden a new spurt of studies started to arise around vaccine hesitancy. A lot of that has happened in response to the second wave, and also a lot of confusion and chaos on what vaccines were available, what the protocol and regimen was, and for what age groups availability happened, how they would be phased out. So again, like last time, a lot of studies have occurred kind of spontaneously. And like with the previous round of COVID research, we felt like it was really important to quickly take stock of who's doing what, to allow for better coordination, reduced kind of duplication and redundancy, and more harmonization in measures. Rohan and colleagues, Ayushi, Nitya, others from Quicksand Secretariat have kind of just looked at all the studies, and they have kind of an Excel spreadsheet that they're presenting today. But I think this is just a way to kind of get a discussion started on, given where we are at and what we know, how should we be measuring vaccine hesitancy? Does it need to be contextualized for settings where supply is still lagging behind latent demand? And should it be contextualized for settings differently where supply is outstripping demand. And the reason I say it, because we haven't actually experienced the latter setting where supply is outstripping demand. So we're doing a lot of these vaccine hesitancy studies in the context where supply is still very low and it's still emerging, and we are anticipating a huge flush of hesitancy. So what that also does is it's kind of also has a tendency to be a little alarmist, but on the other hand, it has an opportunity to be more prepared. So that's the one thing, is to kind of really nuance the way we're measuring hesitancy so that the programs that is rolling out can be more prepared. Which also then brings me to my second point, that who are these studies connecting to and speaking to? Like, where is the program in this context? And is there a way that we can bring better conduit of these studies and these analysis to the government program? And that is why this time around we had the opportunity, because we have colleagues who are, we have an immunization technical support unit, and we have a colleague who's actually on this call today, who's working closely with the vaccine rollout program. So we have that internal connect, which I think is a really opportunity, and we'll have Gunjan speak at some point today before the session ends. And then we also have another kind of initiative to really look at what kind of behavior change communication could be developed from these analyses, anticipating a certain front of hesitancy for specific groups which have specific barriers and specific attitudes towards hesitancy. And those will also be kind of much more local. And Shekhar Menon, who's another colleague on the call, is really looking at that. He's really looking at all of this data from that perspective, because he really works on behavioral insights. So I think what we have is this time around a little bit more of a connect to take this data and really connect it in ways that can be very meaningful to policymakers and to the program. So Rohan, that's really what I wanted to say. And I think both Shekhar and Gunjan are there, and they'll have an opportunity to speak as you present the data, maybe after you present the data, before you go to IDFC, or in the discussion later. So that's all from me. Thanks.
Great. Thank you so much, Priya. Yeah, maybe I'll take just the next 2 to 3 minutes to give you a quick summary, and then we go to IDFC, because I recognize that they also have a few slides, and that might be really interesting to just get to the depths of the conversation. So as you see here, so far from the network, we have about 8 studies that we wanted to sort of bring to everyone's notice. What we've gathered so far is just the first scan of who's asking what questions to what end, and what is the formats in which they're asking these questions. Useful to note here that we actually don't have anyone's survey instruments. We are going by, in some cases, the executive summary from a research study, or a final presentation deck, etc. So there is chances of oversight. We haven't run this through every partner, and then there are chances of misrepresentation. So I apologize for that in case if there are errors. But in the interest of just like learning together, I will still continue to share. So the first 4 studies, I mean, this is sort of organized from the most recent to the oldest. Gramani has done 2 studies based across several states. The interesting thing, of course, as Gramani, we all know, has been able to be in touch with several people through their mobile Vani clubs, and also a platform where they're able to speak with other migrant laborers. So they were able to speak to about 500 and 600 respondents, both people who had taken the survey, taken the vaccination, and others who had not. We have IDFC who will speak about this 3rd study soon, which was mostly for communities in Mumbai and Pune. Again, a combination of several CSOs and organizations that were able to pull, or actually do the study for them, Sneha Mumbai being one of them. So we've those, and a total of 3,600 respondents. There's Seva Bharat, who spoke with community members of their own organization. This was though in early April. So there is some sort of difference that you can see. And again, there's lots that's changed since April, because the second wave is really when all of this was happening. Then an older study from Punjab and Karnataka, which is again very interestingly linked to vaccine communication specifically, where they were speaking not just with beneficiaries or general audience members, but also healthcare workers and local influencers. And then again, Final Mile that spoke with 40 participants across India, and again, very specifically around their behaviors of using the vaccine. And finally, NCAER that has been doing just systematic periodic reviews of quantitative I mean, this is basically data that came from a Facebook CSS study. And in terms of questions, what we wanted to understand was broadly these buckets. Firstly, the awareness and perception towards COVID-19 itself, the awareness and perception towards the COVID-19 vaccine, vaccine hesitancy, and particularly how different groups are trying to measure or understand it, barriers and challenges when people go to take the vaccine, to understand if from that sort of lived experience or user experience, what can be done. Vaccine acceptance. So just a corollary to this, what stuff seems to work, and then other questions in case, people were asking to just link to specific motivations that they seem to have. So from Gramvani, as you can see, they're directly getting into vaccine, and the kind of options that they listed were around efficacy, around fear, around religious reasons, and so on. But then as they went on to details, they were trying to understand whether the vaccination center was too close or too far, or what detailed reasons there might be. Similarly, when in the vaccination, in the survey with people who had taken the vaccine, it was around what challenges they were facing and the registration process, etc. IDFC, as they will share, had a really clear question around readiness, whether people were willing to take the vaccine, not willing to take the vaccine, and had not decided. And then the current status and factors of vaccine hesitancy, that was a long list, and they were able to organize this. Sneha specifically had one around willingness to get the vaccine, not willing to get the vaccine, and reasons for not sure of whether they want the vaccine or not. Seva, again, quite simply had willingness to take the vaccine, and 17, 44, 34 was a clear breakup that came out. And then in terms of barriers, also a sort of clear long list of what made them vaccine hesitant. IDFC, again, reasons for lack of willingness to take the vaccine, and some sort of answers listed out. Maybe they'll clarify this. And again, they were able to speak both with general populations around attitudes, etc., but also attitudes and perceptions for local health workers and influencers. Final Mile plotted people on a hesitancy spectrum, which went from completely willing to completely unwilling, and they'd spotted people in the middle, such as confused, complacent, indifferent, and skeptical. You'd find a more detailed analysis of this in the last coffee hour presentation that they'd made. And finally, NCAER from the Facebook CSS study, again, really clear questions on if a vaccine were present, would you choose to get vaccinated, and then a sliding scale to do that. So, I mean, really quick sort of takeaways. Firstly, it seems quite clear that vaccine hesitancy is a moving target. And as Priya was saying, it seems to hugely depend on whether there is access and supply of the vaccine. And only in that case, you can actually accurately measure vaccine hesitancy. We do need to agree upon who we need to study and to what end. And it's for this reason that even to arrive at a common aggregate sense of what vaccine hesitancy is, it's useful to at least begin to harmonize these measurements, which is why this intention, this is why this effort to bring everyone together. And secondly, the link to the program, right, where particularly it seems like for several groups, they've measured or gathered evidence pointing towards an outcome that they wish to achieve. And which is why it's useful to just get into the details of, what are the kind of questions certainly people from program need for evidence to answer, and how is our research able to respond to that. Yeah, maybe I'll quickly pause here and pass the mic to IDFC Institute. And from IDFC, we have Shilpa and Anisha, Anushka. I'm so sorry, I missed her name.
No
Shilpa and Anushka, who'll speak with us a little bit about their efforts, and they'll talk about their studies. So over to Shilpa and Anushka.
Thank you, Rohan. That was an extremely interesting summary of everything that's been done so far. First of all, thank you to everyone for inviting us on this meeting. Very, very happy to present what we've done so far. So at IDFC, essentially, we've done a total of 2 studies that Rohan spoke about, and 1 additional small pulse poll with one of our research partners. But the goal of one of the studies, particularly Punjab and Karnataka, which we'll present briefly the findings, was really to build a behavior change communication campaign. So the study was designed with that perspective. It was more of a communications needs assessment, unlike the Mumbai and Pune one, which was a larger sort of a vaccine hesitancy study. So what I'll do today is I'll run you through the 3 studies very briefly, because you all have access to the files, and if not, we'll certainly share them with you after this call. But I also do want to focus a little bit of time on the actual campaign that we built out. I know that some of you on this call may have seen it. I apologize, this may be something that you already know and you've seen, but yeah, I hope that the rest of the audience finds this useful. Rohan, would that be okay to touch upon both the research as well as the communications campaign?
Yes, please, very much. Yes.
Great. All right. So get into it. You can change the slide, Rohan. So here are our research partners. Essentially, we had a lot of NGOs that we collaborated with. And of course, our creative partner was an agency called Storytellers, which built out the entire campaign for us. The campaign was originally built for the government of Punjab. So you will see a very Punjab tonality in the entire look and feel. But our intention really is, and here is where I think, everyone on this call can help us, is to put this campaign out there and for anyone else who may need it. So we will essentially produce a very generic toolkit, which has just IDFC branding as well, which we can disseminate widely, on a Creative Commons license and put it, on any resource that you guys think is worthy of doing so. And hopefully, it'll find an audience with respect to use on the field on any channel which has access to communities, both in urban and rural areas. Next slide, Rohan. Yeah. So like I mentioned, we facilitated 3 studies, one of which was conducted directly for the campaign that we built. And the second was the Mumbai and Pune study done with a group of NGOs who turned it around extremely fast on the field for us. And the third is a small pulse polling vaccine intention measurement, which was actually done by a research partner, not so much for IDFC, but they have very kindly agreed to share this with us, and we're going to host the results on our website as well, and it's available for all of you to consume. So the first study was conducted both across urban and rural Punjab and Karnataka. The vaccine awareness study, study number 3, was purely urban, and study 2 again was across West Bengal, just West Bengal. Yeah, I think you can go to the next one. So I'll start with the first study, which was the earliest in the lot. So again, like Rohan mentioned, this is pre-wave 2. So, some of this to be taken with a pinch of salt, but surprisingly, a lot hasn't changed. Or a lot remains the same. Let's put it that way. So next slide, Rohan. Right. So what are the reasons for the lack of willingness to take a vaccine? While there are very, very detailed qualitative findings in our presentation, because like I said, it was a consumer needs assessment study to really design a comms campaign. We've tried to sort of boil down some of the key takeaways from this, but I'd urge you all to look at the full study to get a much deeper picture on Punjab and Karnataka, rural versus urban, etc. So the reasons for lack of willingness to take a vaccine broadly fall under 4 categories. One is, of course, that no faith in the vaccine being tested well enough. It was approved in a hurry, it wasn't tested. And Punjab, more than Karnataka, there was an overwhelming sort of favoritism towards Covishield rather than Covaxin, because I think in Punjab, there is this general tendency to favor anything that's made out of particularly UK and Canada. So, Covishield was Covishield and Covaxin was, the obvious second choice for most people that we spoke to. Side effects, of course, I think this is the bucket in which most of the reasons for hesitancy fall into. unknown side effects, no information about how, this is again pre-wave one, no information about how it will affect people with and without comorbidities, fear of death, all sorts of extreme misinformation on side effects, etc. Low effectiveness of the vaccine, concerns about its efficacy and safety, not in those terms, but whether it'll actually work. What if everyone does not take it? Will it work? And the fact that this came as a surprise to people in March was that if I have to take a vaccine and still continue COVID appropriate behavior, what's the point? I thought I could free myself of that major change that I had to make in my life once I take the vaccine. But so that actually came out as a deterrent for many people. And then the fourth bucket of people who deny COVID entirely, let alone the vaccine. So in a position where you deny COVID, it's, what do you say? So, and again, this is pre-wave one, please to be noted. COVID, just a seasonal flu, there is no disease, so why should there be a vaccine? And a deep trust in home remedies and healthy food and homely food and things like ragi balls in Karnataka to be able to tide over anything that COVID throws their way. Sorry. Next slide, Rohan. Now, when it comes to reasons to take the vaccine, reasons broadly fall under 4 categories. Again, some people think it's well tested and that the government is working tirelessly to eradicate this disease. So, they must be doing things right. And this view came more from Karnataka than Punjab. Punjab was an overwhelmingly, the mood was overwhelmingly towards distrust towards the government, whether it was state or central, both, not necessarily towards the central government. So Karnataka, you found a more believing crowd and, slightly more, I would say, I don't know if educated is the right word, but slightly more evolved perceptions. It's a way to normalcy to my life and work. Very simple. We all can relate to that. It's the only way we know to get back to what we knew as normal. Someone I know has taken the vaccine, someone I know and trust has taken the vaccine. And this came out in subsequent studies as well, that affirmation from your friends, colleagues, neighbors, doctors, neighborhood doctors, influencers, local influencers works very, very well. And a recommendation from a doctor and someone from the medical fraternity like ASHA or government hospitals like AIIMS. Next slide, Rohan. So I think universally, while certain demographics, for example, we found that rural areas there is a sense of disbelief and a sense that this is an urban disease. And surprisingly, this came out even in our second study after wave 2, that this is largely an urban disease. And if we're in rural India, we're safe. We breathe clean air, we eat good food, we exercise well, we won't get COVID. So while there are different demographics who feel a certain way, I think, these are 6 areas where we felt everybody agreed. And especially when it came to design a communication campaign, we realized that this is probably then what we should focus on. So one was, of course, if like some people don't even believe COVID exists, so then how can they possibly think it's a major health risk? And again, the rural versus urban divide. And we also saw certain age groups in Punjab which were completely in denial of the disease. So a lot of demographics have a low health impact concern. But when it comes to reduced wages and livelihoods being affected, educational gaps for their kids, mothers being sick of kids being at home and addicted to mobile phones, reduced social connect between family members and friends, restricted mobility, and an emotional discomfort, we broadly saw that nobody disagreed on these 5 to 6 aspects. Yeah, Rohan, next slide. So the acceptance of vaccine as a way to our pre-COVID life was probably the trigger that was likely to push the needle in behavior change, right? So one, a resumption in livelihoods, a resumption in education for our children, them getting their childhood back, improved social connects, unrestricted mobility, me being able to go wherever I want, and just being freed of the emotional discomfort that you're subjected to on a day-to-day basis, whether at work or at home because of COVID. Next slide, Rohan. So very broadly, these are the key findings. I think I've already gone through them. I won't get into it. But what we learned from the February study was that the health impact concerns were lesser. And it was more the impact that COVID has caused on their life and the fear of another lockdown and what it will do to their livelihoods and employment and their kids. the range of factors surrounding COVID and how it affects their life. And of course, a complete, lack of wanting to practice COVID appropriate behavior after a vaccine. One interesting thing which we saw was some demographics in Karnataka and Punjab saw the vaccine as a curative measure and not a preventative one. So, in India, when you say sui or injection, it's always, associated with something you get when you fall sick. So a lot of people said that, yeah, when I get COVID, I will get the vaccine. Now that there's a medicine, I don't need to worry about it. So while it's not a majority view, but we did see this in our qualitative FGDs and IDIs, as well as in our Mumbai study, as our follow-on Mumbai study. Next slide, Rohan. Right, I'll quickly take you through the pulse polling vaccine intention, which was conducted in West Bengal. And this is between March and May of 2021. There were 2 tracks. We did 2 rounds of pulse polling. So you see track 1 and track 2. Track 1 was in March and track 2 was through May, right? So simple question, would you take the vaccine if offered to you? Most people said yes, even in track 1, and you saw there's a slight increase. There's actually a fair increase in track 2, which is very encouraging among males. Among females, you saw the increase to be slightly lesser, which is a bit worrying. One never knows why that could be the case. And of course, you have a wait and watch, which has largely remained the same for females. And for males, it's decreased from 14% to 9.6%, which is again a good thing. So yeah, next slide, Rohan. Sorry, next slide, Rohan. Yeah. Would you take the vaccine if offered to you? If we were to look at an urban and rural cut, this is what you see. Majority says yes. A minority is on the no. And again, wait and watch varies between 15% to 11%. In rural areas, however, you see a higher proportion of people saying no, slightly higher than urban. And again, the wait and watch community has somewhat remained the same. So has the yes community in rural areas. And our studies have consistently shown us that rural populations think they can beat COVID. And, it's not something that will affect them, at least in a very grave manner. So yeah, next slide, Rohan. And the third question we asked, so we asked just these 2 questions. Would you take the vaccine? And would you want your elders in your family to take the vaccine? So since that was at the time, the first sort of population set which was being offered the vaccine, of course, now things have changed. Most people said yes, with respect to taking, allowing the elders in the families in their families to take the vaccine. There's still a wait and watch community. And of course, the already been vaccinated is still a small number. It's not that big. Yeah, next slide, Rohan. All right, so coming to the third study, which is our awareness, eagerness, and hesitancy study conducted among urban communities in Mumbai and Pune. And this was the most recent study we did, which was in June. Next slide, Rohan. So here we got the opportunity to do a quantitative study. Our first study was largely qual, and this gave us a good idea just to put a number in terms of, how many people are actually willing to get vaccinated. So it turns out that while 48% wasn't a surprise, 25% of people being completely opposed was higher than what we thought. And of course, 27% of people, being not decided, which effectively means greater than 50% of the population at the time were not in the zone of willing to be vaccinated. So there's definitely a role for interventions, various kinds. We'll come to the barriers in the next slide. When it comes to reasons for vaccine hesitancy, interestingly, the reason for hesitancy is health risks, but the reason to take the vaccine or opt for the vaccine is not always health. So that's the contradiction in the way people think, when you weigh your risks versus rewards, right? So health risk was on top of mind. Insufficient information on the vaccines not available at center, because there was shortage was a major issue at the time. No permission from family and from community and elders. Not the right course of treatment, etc., etc. But predominantly, the worry is health risk. The hesitancy arises from health risks. Next slide, Rohan. So when it comes to sort of identifying what are the barriers, 3 came to mind. 3 emerged from the study, right? So the first is the individual and the mindset barriers, which range from anything to distrust towards the process, distrust towards the government, side effects, not for me, this disease is a myth. If I eat healthy and if I have my kadha, I'm good, right? The second is a community level barrier. And that is, also a little complicated one to deal with, but I think, both individual and community can be dealt with similar solutions. Families, elders, and particularly husbands, don't permit. So, especially even if their children have migrated and doing a job, and I know of, two people in my building whom I'm counseling on a day-to-day basis, whose parents have forbidden them from taking the vaccine, even though they're employed in Bangalore. Women not having the power to decide, men sort of putting their foot down to say, you're not going to take the vaccine. And, a third very clear operational barrier, which, is for the larger forces to solve, on shortage of vaccines, very high cost, which of course has been dealt with now. This was before vaccines were made free. Need to travel very far, missing a day wage, to be able to do it. And I don't know how many days of work I'll miss because of side effects, host of things. So yeah, right. The next slide, Rohan. All right. So key insights in Maharashtra. Who are the people who people think are most trustworthy? And I think this came out even in our Punjab and Karnataka study. Local community leaders, mandal presidents, Gurdwara leaders, Asha workers, sarpanches. These are people who are trusted. Local NGOs, local doctors, decision makers, but not entirely reliable. Families, elders, and decision makers, they play a huge role, but they may not necessarily be predisposed in a good way towards the vaccine. Frontline health workers are very, very important, but we also learned through our Mumbai and Punjab study that we interviewed frontline workers as a part of our study, and many of them said that they don't have the right information to give, even when people come to them, or they don't have the right words to be able to articulate what the people needed to hear. So and they were looking, what most people said, healthcare workers said, were a single source of truth, of information. Where is it and how do we know it? And if we don't know it, how do we communicate it to the people who come to us? Right? And what's unreliable? News channels, social media, film stars, celebrities. Punjab, while there was a certain community who said that, if politicians come forward and say it, we'll do it. Several others were clear of the fact that politicians, celebrities, rich people come and say it to us, it means nothing to us, because of course they are going to be, pro-vaccine, and of course they can afford to take the vaccine. They are not a community that we can relate to. And again, different people have had different experiences with this, but this is what we saw particularly in Punjab, and through our studies. Yeah, sorry, I think I'm taking a little more time than I should on research. Yeah, go ahead, Rohan. I'll jump through the next slides quickly. I've gone through this. You can move on. Yeah. All right. So this is again, these are voices from the field which we've gotten through our engagement with Government of Punjab, and we've been talking a lot to the community, to Asha workers, to sarpanches, to district development fellows working with Punjab, and the misinformation ranges from plain batshit crazy to very, very valid, right? So I mean, the craziest one, just to have a laugh, was the oxygen crisis is because trees are being cut down. People actually said this to us, and valid things like, will I be able to get pregnant after taking the vaccine? Will it affect my chances of having a baby? Will it make me infertile? Something as random as vaccine will alter my DNA, and I'm drinking lemon water and khada, I'm going to be fine. So yeah, these were just some of the voices from the field, which we have plenty more of. I'm happy to share it with any of you if you want. All right, so coming to what the main purpose of the research was for us. Of course, we definitely want to invest and continue in doing more research, and we hopefully will be able to do more over the next few months. But one of the priorities which the institute had was to, okay, so what do we do about this? I mean, we have these findings, what are the best ways to deal with them? Now, it's obviously very clear that an operational barrier can't really be solved by communications. Communications is not a magic wand. It can't fix the problem. It really can't change the supply of vaccine situation. But when it comes to the mindset barriers and the community barriers that you saw in the Mumbai and Pune study, we believe that communications and behavior change communication particularly has a very, very important role to play. And luckily, we had a very eager client in Government of Punjab who decided to work with us. So we're working with them. We've built out a full toolkit comprising of close to 45 pieces of content, which will be sort of going live on hoardings, on billboards, on all sort of public real estate that the Department of Information and Public Relations has. Hopefully by mid-August, we're almost in the process of finalizing the entire thing. So yeah, I'll just run you through how we arrived at what the trigger and what the motivation should be for communication. And if I have time, Rohan, I'd also love to show you guys some of the content that we've built. So yeah, let's dive into it. Rohan, please stop me and tell me if I'm taking too long. Yeah. So I think I've already discussed this. There are barriers, there are motivators, and there are concerns. How do we build a communication campaign out of this, right? Go ahead, Rohan. Yeah. So how do we arrive at the trigger, right? And Kalyani Rajan, who's not on the call today, she's a strategic communication expert. In fact, a public health strategic communication expert who's worked with JWT for over 3 decades. Was also a part of our team, and she always tells us, I mean, she was also working on the polio campaign. She repeats day in and day out to us that health benefits do not persuade, right? Persuasion is what you need from strategic communication. You don't need information. You don't need top-down communication, right? You need empathetic persuasion. So I think the biggest takeaway for us was that health benefits is not it. COVID has disrupted lives. It has destroyed everything that was dear to us, everything that was normal. Yes, of course, wave 2 has enhanced the health risk. We do not deny that. But at the end of the day, I think that memory also fades. And what persuades people over time really to move is the fact that, this is the only way to go back to your own life, to what you knew, everything you held dear. Right? So what do people want? How can we show empathy through communication? One, remove the instructional tone of communication, which is pretty much what you see from government. I mean, sorry to say, it's most of it is very instructional. It's very information based. It's extremely loaded. You need a minimum of 5 minutes to be able to read any Ministry of Health poster, and even then, you really don't know what is the sort of big takeaway that you have. So while that's important, and I think I don't want to undermine the role of that. There's a absolute need for that. If we really want to do a mass media strategic communications campaign, we have to go beyond that. Reduce voluminous information, reduce the top-down approach, and lift sort of the gloom and spirits that people have, particularly post-wave 2. Got it, Rohan? I'll do that. Next slide. So the key motivator here, I've already said this, I'm tired of COVID and this new normal, and I'll do anything that goes back, that allows me to go back to my old life. This does not work for me. Next slide, Rohan. So here is our broad thematic approach, and this is the logo of the campaign that we built. Yes, it's time. It's my turn. Yes, it's time in English, and ab meri bari in Hindi, and in Punjabi, et ki saadi wari. So the affirmation of vaccine acceptance, the fact that you've made that decision in your mind, that okay, I get it. I know that there are risks, but I still know that this is the only possible way back to my old life, and therefore I'm ready for my COVID vaccine. Right? You can go to the next slide. So we have posters as a part of our toolkit. They're both an information dissemination tool in small tidbits. And we built this in consultation with the Department of Health and Family Welfare. So you see a persuasive element which says that ab bas kaam par jana hi hai, maine tika lagwaya hai, ye meri purani zindagi ko jeetne ke liye ek bada kadam hai. So that's the persuasion, non-health persuasion. And then you see this small pink strip on the side which says that सेहत माहिरान कहते हैं कि कोविड वैक्सीन कोविड की गंभीरता के खिलाफ सबसे अच्छा बचाव है. So even to articulate the health benefit, we thought a lot about it. What is it that we can say that connects with the people, is not too scientific. It's easily discernible to the common man, and it still makes you wake up and say, oh, okay, I understand, I get it. So I think the key message which most experts we spoke to told us was that it does not stop you from getting COVID. It can only minimize the risk of severe COVID, or like one of the lines we keep saying in the team, let's put it this way, you'll never have to see the inside of a hospital if you take because of COVID, if you take the COVID vaccine. So we have both the health and the non-health motivation. Next slide, Rohan. Yeah, we have social media frames, profile pictures, and we have these sort of frames which you can attach once you've been vaccinated, COVID vaccine superstars, to really sort of encourage people to become positive deviances for people in their community, both online and offline, right? Next slide, yeah. So we built a set of 10 FAQ films with Dr. Gagandeep Kang, who I'm sure all of you know very well. She's a leading vaccine expert, global vaccine expert based out of CMC Vellore. So these are the 10 questions that we addressed. So she did them in English and Hindi for us, and we had a Punjabi doctor do it in Punjabi as well. So these are going to be hosted on the YouTube channels of Government of Punjab. And we're also in talks with YouTube itself to promote it on their COVID-19 ticker. And, you know, once the films have been uploaded by Government of Punjab, you'll see them there. And so you can access them. And she does a great job of sort of summarizing answers to this in less than a minute in a very, very common speak, non-scientific way. Next slide, Rohan. Right. So this is another thing we did, taking from the cue that Rohan, you two brought up in terms of sources of information. Who are the people that people trust and want to listen to, right? Trust is one thing, and who do you want to listen to the message from? So,
angle galat liya.
Sorry.
Oh, I'm so sorry about that. I will put Anupam on mute. I'm sorry.
No worries.
I'm sorry about that.
No, I was wondering if something I said was funny enough, so no issues. All right, so you know, we developed, you know, we wanted to do more influencers, but any influencer that we spoke to was very, very wary about you know, coming on board with the campaign. So we have Harjinder Singh Kukreja, who's a social media sort of a star in Punjab. He did a bunch of 3 videos with his family and children on why he believes that, you know, we should take the vaccine. We'll share them with you again offline. And we have a bunch of testimonials of Ashas and Sarpanchs who have taken the vaccine and who vouch for it. And interestingly, many of them said, you know, please take Covishield. So we had to edit those out, but on a lighter note. But yeah, these are very sort of relatable videos from, you know, real heroes who've sort of taken the vaccine and can be champions of the same. Next slide, Rohan. So we have flyers, very simple, 2 double-sided flyers with 8 questions. We had more, but we whittled them down to these 8. I think between these, they cover most of the issues and the doubts that people have in their mind. And this, we think, can be a great tool for frontline health workers to actually, you know, be able to articulate these answers well to the people who sort of come to them with questions. So this is the flyer, and this is the only sort of offline IPC material that we have. Yeah, next one. Social media banners with our logo saying it's my turn, I'm ready for my vaccine. So we did a bunch of slightly fun stuff for social media digital content on 10 issues or so, which you'll see them listed here. You know, how do you explain things like this to the common man in language that appeals to them in a way that can potentially be viral and therefore shared? Herd immunity, that all vaccines work, don't compare, you know, complete doses, the necessity for complete doses. So some of them are slide videos. Again, unfortunately, it doesn't work on a Zoom interface, which is why we did not embed here. But you know, some of them are slide videos, some of them are statics. So they take you through a logic of, you know, why, for example, like a half an umbrella doesn't protect you from rain. So half a dose does not protect you from severe COVID, right? Just like we all have different names as humans, vaccines have different names, don't compare. And we have one on, you know, celebrating the next slide, Rohan, you can go. Celebrating and building on the success of polio, right? Because that's something we all relate to and we all know and we're so proud of as a nation in terms of defeating. So we have a post which says we defeated polio with just 2 drops. Let's do the same with COVID-19, right? And then the second post there is on herd immunity, etc., etc. So anyway, yeah, that's broadly the digital content. And this is something I just wanted to leave as the last thought with the group here. And, you know, all of you have access to incredible networks at your end, much more than IDFC can ever dream of. We really want this toolkit to reach as many people as possible. And, you know, if whatever way that you can help us, we are absolutely glad to be partnering with you, and we will share this content completely free of cost. IDFC wants nothing out of this. You know, it's purely a public interest effort from our end, and yeah, we're proud of it, and we would love to share it with anybody who wants it. So thank you, Rohan. Thank you everybody for the chance to speak today. Really appreciate it. I hope I did okay on time.
Great, thank you. Yeah, we're a little bit over, but that's completely all right, because this was so insightful. Also, the fact that you were able to really clearly show us the link between evidence and what that could mean for intervention. I think that's really good. I see one clarifying question which we could take, and then I could possibly pass it on for other questions and comments. There's Amit who's asking us on particularly around misinformation, and if there was any way you were able to capture that, sources of it, and some quantifiability around that.
So thanks, Rohan. So Amit, you know, the most notorious source is WhatsApp across the board. I think everybody said that WhatsApp was the single largest source of misinformation. One other one is local news, regional news TV channels. So TV9 in Karnataka, I don't know what is the one in Punjab, but TV9 is I mean, even before an outbreak has started, they have the news on it. It's like so the local regional language news channels and WhatsApp. I don't have quantitative data to your question, but this is, I trust generally the information I get from ASHA workers and the field officers that we work with government of Punjab, and across the board, they hate WhatsApp. For them, WhatsApp is a bane of their yeah.
To add on to what Shilpa said, even sources of information which I think they trust the most, and we've seen across our studies, is with local government bodies and local leaders, and someone from the community getting the vaccination more than any paid channel of communication from government sources or something, because they think it wouldn't be verified or trustworthy. So that's something we have seen across our studies too.
But is it, I mean, people are still sort of spreading that information on WhatsApp regardless, right? I mean, like, do you see, like, did you find, I mean, were there any questions related to WhatsApp at all, or you just felt like—
No, not really. I mean, we did ask where you get some of this information from our call studies. Anushka, correct me if I'm wrong. Did the Pune study have where you
Yes.
get your, did we ask? Sorry, then please go ahead.
So our Mumbai and Pune study did have a question about what were the sources of information and whether WhatsApp and social media and news channels, as Shilpa said, were. And they pointed us towards saying that madam and sir, humko nahi pata hai ki ye kya hota hai, kyunki there's so much that they don't know whether it's true or false. So that's where this is. So if you give them 5 reasons about vaccination, why you should take it, they're like, we don't know which one to trust because there's so much information out there.
All right, thank you. I guess there's one more question from Hasna, which is quite interesting. Hasna, would you like to unmute yourself and share your question, or maybe? Yes.
Hi, Rohan. Yeah, I mean, I think Anushka has answered this question. So my question was essentially that when you say there is fear of side effects, just wanted to know what that split really looked like, because these side effects could be in 2 ways, right? One, you have seen these immediate side effects with others. You've seen people having fever, and what would that imply for me if I take vaccine? The second is, I don't know what the side effects are. This could be really bad. I don't know what's going to happen. And both of these are things that I've seen. I'm from a rural part in Kerala right now. Both of these are things that I've seen here, including the fear of death. So I just wanted to know if if you guys were able to capture that split, what affected people more.
If I may get your question, Hasna, is your question, which is the side effect which is most top of mind?
Yes.
Okay. I mean, again, see, it's health related, primarily, obviously health related side effect. Fear of death came up very often. I can't give you quantitatively. Fear of death was across the board. Many people said, yeah, like I said, not being able to conceive, infertility. Can I eat in Punjab? The biggest concern was I will not be able to eat non-veg after I have the vaccine. So that's it ranged from extremely extreme views to extreme misinformations to things like this. Most top of mind is hard to say. I think it's a combination of all of these things. Anushka, do you have anything to add to that? Any side effect which came out as particularly strong? Fear of death is definitely strong. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, I think fear of death and fear of COVID were 2 very strong ones.
That's right. Fear of getting COVID from the vaccine, by the way. So yeah, that itself. So if I don't have it, I'm going to get COVID after I get it.
Shilpa, sorry, just needed to add a clarification there. By short-term side effects, I also meant, putting me out of work for 2 days. How strong was that? Yeah.
Not very strong in the Punjab and Karnataka. That was old. Okay. So Anushka, did this come out in a big way in the Mumbai study?
Yes, at some point it did, in terms of when the vaccination drives were open. And even in terms of quantitative data, we've seen that when vaccination drives are, we see more people getting vaccinated on a Friday or Saturday, so they don't miss work. So I think in some way it is related, but we don't have quantifiable data from our studies to show that.
Great, thanks.
And also, in March, when there was a climate of that, you just desperately take a vaccine whenever you get it, that doesn't exist anymore because the supply has eased out, so that people can plan a little bit more. But having said that, I'm not ruling that out as a problem, for people who are daily wage laborers. Absolutely. Yeah.
I guess this is a related question. I don't know if we've captured this yet, but Shama a little bit earlier on, and I thought that was quite interesting. When most people, 15% say they're going to wait and watch, are we able to unpack exactly what they're waiting for? And particularly now that it seems that the sense of urgency keeps going up and down, like is there a way to spark that? Yeah.
So, Anushka, add if I'm missing something. So, wait and watch particularly comes from, I want to wait from someone in my immediate circle to get it, wait and see how they're doing. Nothing crazy happens to them. And then I'll take the vaccine, and even then I will take my time to take the vaccine. But I need that. That is the validation that people are looking for when it comes to wait and watch, right? Anushka, you want to add to that?
No, I think that that makes
that's
sense.
predominantly what it is. And who to trust would be, so many people said, if my doctor tells me I should take it, and if he takes it and he's fine, I'm going to take it. Some people said my neighbor, some people said my relative, saying my cousin took it for 2 weeks back, I'm just going to wait and watch and see. So it's people that you can witness and then decide. Yeah.
Right. Okay, there's a question from Monica, and I guess one of you can respond to that. We're about 7 minutes to time, so I'm just gonna see if Gunjan or Shekhar are still in the room and would like to share something. Shekhar, perhaps you, if you have any thoughts.
Not on this. Thanks a lot to Shilpa, Anushka, and the team for the work, and really, really interesting piece of work. Would really like to see how it's proceeding, right? How the campaign is performing on the ground. What are the results? How are we tracking that? That'd be really nice to see. And how, what are the kind of learnings that we get as we move forward? The COVID context also keeps changing and shifting, and some of these insights will have to be revisited. Communication
absolutely.
campaign has to be rejigged. I want to go back a little to, pre-IDFC talk to what we discussed earlier in terms of all the kind of studies that we have. From I think what would be useful from all of these studies is to one, have a synthesis like Rohan, what you're doing, and others are also attempting to synthesis in two buckets, right? One on diagnosis, what is affecting hesitancy, size, spread, scope, reasons, factors, etc., right? And one on design. Therefore, what can we do to overcome those factors of hesitancy? And then later we can figure out the implementation part and connects to the program implementing units, etc. But I would say that the hesitancy, all the research it will be nice to have this synthesis across these two buckets. And any further research that happens would be nice to to sort of align at what is a survey tool or what is the research tool that you're using across these two buckets to say, okay, can we standardize a bit of the design, the diagnosis bit? Can we align on how to research on design bit? And this, I understand it's a very complex task because you have different sort of channels and modes. What works on a survey won't work on a phone, won't work on face-to-face, an IDI, quant versus qual. So complete alignment is not possible, but then at least there are some guiding principles as a team we can come together and design. So, okay, here's what we'll follow for diagnosis, here's what we'll follow for design research. So that's my 2 cents on the earlier topic. Thanks a lot. Really enjoyed the sessions.
Just to briefly respond, Rohan, if I may.
Yes, please.
Yeah. Shekhar, I'm I think it's a very good point. And I just want to let everybody know in the room, we are happy to share our survey instruments, everything that we use through this process, right? For us, I think what's important is that more people get their hands on it, make it better and evolve it. I mean, if that helps in any way in shaping, templates for the future. Yeah.
That'll really help Rohan and team as well. And Shilpa, like you mentioned, I'll try to reach out to the IFC team to see how you can open source and host some of this, the tools and the creatives, etc. Thanks.
Oh, that would be fantastic. Thanks, Shekhar. We'll be in touch. Anyway, we wanted to speak with you, so maybe we can reconnect. And I'd love to hear your ideas on how we can monitor the success of the campaign. To be honest, we are not experts. This is our first foray into communication. So, yeah.
Great. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks.
Great. Yes, Prerna has also requested if it's possible to share your survey instrument. If you're able to share that with us, we can share that with the rest of the network. I also see some of our colleagues from Dalberg here, and if I could take a quick minute to see if they'd like to share or add anything from the work that they've been doing. I know they're also developing a survey instrument right now. Does this resonate? Was this useful? Anyone from the Dalberg team? Sorry for putting you all on the spot, though. Yeah.
Hi, everyone. This is Aditya from
Hey,
Dalberg.
hey, hi.
And thanks, Shilpa, for sharing some of these insights. Super helpful and really helps us see the value of the work that we are doing as well. I was really hopeful that we can leverage some of the tools and instruments that you have been using. So maybe we can reach out to you to kind of see if what we are trying to collect at our end in some of the districts and states is similar to what you have collected. So I think that will be helpful.
Absolutely.
Other than that, findings are quite resonant based on our study so far. We'll be looking forward to share our findings in some of our subsequent sessions.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks, Aditya. Happy to. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Great. Over to Gunjan. Gunjan, if you're able to share with us a little bit on particularly the piece with tying some of these findings to the program, as Shekhar was suggesting. Would you be able to share with us a little bit more?
So thank you so much, Rohan, and thank you, Shekhar and IDFC team for this very elaborate and comprehensive presentation. Just taking off, I think what we need to realize is the hesitancy or the vaccine hesitancy related to COVID is
it just me or is it Gunjan breaking up for everybody?
Yeah, also for me.
Am I audible now?
Yes, this is a little bit better, Gunjan, yes.
So the starting point of course for us to realize that the environment in which this hesitancy is operating is slightly altered. So the COVID-related vaccine hesitancy is different, it is dynamic and dependent. By different, I mean that it's for the first time that adults have come into the foray. We don't have an adult immunization program, so it's opened up a lot more of new avenues and questions to be answered. It is dynamic because it is connected to the way the pandemic is evolving, and it is dependent because we are not actually looking at the core definition of what hesitancy is. So in a way, the point which I'm trying to make is that hesitancy comes into play and to the point that Priya made in the beginning, when supply is not an issue. So the hesitancy here is also linked somehow to the supply part of. And going back to your questions on contextualizing vaccine hesitancy, I think which is a core discussion point for today. So I'll just categorize it into looking at who the stakeholders are. There are different stakeholders, what their contexts are to this or to the hesitancy or to the COVID vaccine program. Why do these stakeholders actually need to be engaged, or why they don't want to be engaged? And then when and where they can be engaged and how they can be engaged. So there are different players starting from manufacturers to the end line or the last mile beneficiaries, and all of them have their own apprehensions or let's say stake into this process. And ultimately it depends on whether one individual or an individual wants to get vaccinated or not, in spite of having everything. Now the work in Punjab, I think, is really important. In the early days, Punjab was one state where hesitancy, even we were seeing it with healthcare workers and frontline workers, being very high. The next step, of course, is to how to feed this into the programmatic component. We have our ITSU colleagues here, and we work with a lot of program teams. So I am of the opinion that the research and evidence synthesis that we are doing right now has an implication as to how the program will evolve in the next 2 or 3 months. So for example, vaccinations or vaccines for children getting emergency approved, that will again open another set of questions that we need to answer. We are seeing a lot of hesitancy amongst pregnant females and lactating mothers, which again might not be that widespread, but is localized to select pockets. Third, different states now in different stages of the pandemic. So how is the behavior and perception really changing? So for me, in a nutshell, what is important is how this work, whether operational research or quick dipsticks or qualitative insights, can actually be merged with the work which is happening on the program part of it. And the starting point, I believe, is the work which ITSU is coordinating, to which a lot of our partner organizations have contributed to. So the dossier on vaccine hesitancy, which would be submitted to the ministry in due course, help us understand how it's operating in different parts of the country. There is a lot which we know, but would add to that evidence base, how in a way there are actions which need to be beefed up, need to be started new, or the work which is already happening through state governments, partners, and the national government needs to be augmented. We'll be happy, as Rohan we have discussed, we'll be happy to make that connect between the organizations which are right now working or doing evidence generation and synthesis with the program teams, so that that loop is sort of completed. Over.
That's fantastic. Thanks so much, Gunjan. And I think, I mean, it's also great, as we discussed, we would like to plan and do a session also with the ITSU to understand what are the emergent questions that research can fill, and hopefully CoreNet becomes that space we're able to fill these gaps. Great. Yeah, we're 4 minutes over. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining this session. This was very, very useful. Thanks particularly to Shilpa for sharing these insights. Also to Anushka for fielding all the questions on chat. Yeah, thank you. Babita has also shared in the chat that we are in the process of collating and putting more studies together. So in case if you are aware of a study, if you're doing one yourself, intend to do one, please write to us and we'd be able to help you with all the material that we've gathered so far. And yeah, it'll be, and hopefully this is of use to all of us. Again, thanks everyone for joining. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Thank you, Rohan. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.